If California had a strong leader who cleaned up the problems in our state and stopped wasting money, we could have no income tax for any income earned under $250,000 and finally make California competitive again. But we've got some things to talk about first. Why does California, the 5th largest economy in the world, struggle with crime, schooling, homelessness, and can't even keep the power on or supply our farms with enough water?
The crime trend prompting a major retailer to make a drastic change. We've learned Target is cutting its hours after a spike in thefts.
Every day there's fires, guns, knives, crime. There's a lot of crime here.
In San Francisco, carrying handbags
of organized retail theft.
The number of homeless tents and encampments has been skyrocketing.
They've taken over everything, and we're concerned about the safety of our employees.
My name is Kevin Paffrath, and I'm running for governor to provide the solutions we need to end the bullshit that's happening in our state.
Higher electricity bills, periodic rationing, and blackouts for millions of households and businesses.
For the most gridlocked city in the world.
Very horrifying. The wind and the fire and the speed of it, it just overtook everybody.
Why is this happening to our beautiful state? It's not because of hardworking Californians who follow the rules and pay their taxes. No, it's because of the broken policies of our government. It's broken leadership that leads to fragmented rules and regulations that don't look at California as a whole. We need a new leader to fix this mess.
So California has implemented a lot of regulations at the state level and also at the local level that makes it very difficult and very expensive to build new housing.
The beef that comes from the cattle it feeds is the highest water use food commonly available. Drip and sprinkler irrigation can be much more efficient, but Nancy told us she's not been able to get the permits needed to change the irrigation style on the farm.
They've handcuffed the LAPD and told them, you're not going to enforce anything because we don't want to offend anybody.
The insanity of the education system where kids can't learn to read. I mean, literally don't know how to read. But
by now, you probably know that my name is Kevin Paffrath. All I did was take that money and plow it.
He's 29 years old, a multi-millionaire in real estate and the stock market.
And is now probably worth almost $700,000 on a busy...
He's got 1.6 million followers on his Meet Kevin YouTube channel.
In our research, in our interviews, and in our studying of making sure that we solve California in the best way possible.
He's got an ambitious 1-year, 5-point plan to fix California.
The homelessness, schooling, poverty, crime, very, very important. Then we'll get into solving our traffic crisis and our housing crisis.
And he's running for governor as a Democrat.
So I want to give back. I want to fix California and make California a wonderful place to live because it is a beautiful place to live. We just have broken politics.
A Democrat challenging Governor Newsom in the recall election. He's 29-year-old Kevin Paffrath.
Amazing. Thank you very much.
Paffrath is a Southern California real estate investor who's followed by millions on YouTube and other social media platforms. He just completed 9 rallies in 10 days across the state. He was in studio with us tonight on the Fox 11 News Special Report.
But guess what? After 60 days of my governorship, nobody sleeps on the floor or streets of California anymore. That ends in 60 days.
Paffrath is an internet personality.
At 29 years old, you're the youngest candidate for governor so far. You've had great success.
Kevin Paffrath is a real estate broker.
And fast-track permits, even for remodels, to which I say yes. Meet Kevin. I appreciate that you have come up with a lot of logical plans here. There's more to dig into. I hope you come back on the show, Kevin.
But you might not know that I've been together with my wife for 13 years. I'm also a dad. I have 2 beautiful young boys, 3 and 5, Jack and Max, and I'm concerned about what the future of California is going to look like for them. There's still time to fix California for them, but quite frankly, we need emergency action to start repairing California now, especially for those who are struggling. I'm personally seeking to be your governor to implement emergency action that will streamline our ability to solve homelessness fast, to solve housing, traffic, schooling, and crime problems that we have in the state. With a strong leader we can make massive improvements. And if you like what you hear and see in this video, consider going to stopthebullship.com. Support the campaign. For the next $1 million that are donated to this campaign, I will match $1 of expenses towards this campaign. That means if you donate $100, we'll have $200 towards making this campaign as successful as a movement as possible, because we need to work together to fix California.
The on-the-ground reality is more representative of a Charles Dickens novel than a utopia.
It smells of urine everywhere.
A SoCal shocker. Los Angeles once again takes top honors for the most gridlocked city in the world.
California's top marginal income tax rate is now 13.3%, which is already one of the highest in the nation. The legislature is actively discussing raising it to 16.8%.
I saw today there was a happiness index put out, California remaining one of the happiest states for individuals to live in the United States of America.
So I don't think we're going to come back. We're going to come roaring back. And I can assure you, if I talk to you in 6 months, we're going to be in a completely different place.
Well, Governor Gavin Newsom, things have only gotten worse since all of these clips. But folks, let's talk a little bit more about me, problems that we have in the state, and solutions, because I don't just like to talk about problems, I actually like to provide solutions. And that is how a leader operates. Let's get into it. My background is in law enforcement, handling crime and homelessness firsthand while balancing bureaucracy. I have an educational background in economics, accounting, and political science from the University of California at Los Angeles. And for a living, I teach wealth building and financial education on YouTube. And I know that the problems we have in California are difficult, but they're very similar to my background. And I realize that all of these are interconnected. For example, why don't we teach financial education at our middle and high schools? Don't we all deserve to learn about finance and building wealth by 18? Shouldn't we be able to graduate debt-free for free at 18 with a career? Shouldn't adults have a similar opportunity to get an education rather than be stuck in multiple minimum wage jobs relying on the government just to get by? Folks, 1/3. 1 out of every 3 Californians is on Medi-Cal, relying on the government just to get by. It's not their fault. It's not the bureaucrats' fault. It's not our businesses' faults, and it's not our union's faults. It's not the Californian people's fault. It's the governor's fault. It's the broken leadership that we have had in the last 24 years in this state, which it's no surprise that Governor Gavin Newsom has been in politics, leading politics in California for the last 24 years. Just as another example, consider 70% of the homeless on our streets become homeless because of economic reasons due to joblessness, evictions, or poverty. These are preventable issues. Now, unfortunately, many people on our streets then fall victim to mental health issues and substance abuse issues. Yet, we never learn about mental education in our schools. We might learn about physical education, but how about mental education? Folks, there's so many things, so many common sense solutions that a governor can lead and implement in our state. Currently, we have a governor who refuses to do any of this.
Half of African Americans in the state of California, roughly half of Latino families, have no access to a checking account or an ATM. Things we take for granted. They don't have a checking account.
What's wrong with that?
And well, because they don't have the resources to sock those things away.
Why do we have them?
A lot of different reasons, but roughly half those families don't. I mean, a lot of communities have. A lot of whites have these problems.
Oh, so that's not just black and Hispanic.
No, but
why did you bring up black and Hispanic?
Because the magnitude is ominous.
But why so many of them?
It just happens to be the magnitude.
That's the way God planned it?
This is a very telling and dangerous time in a lot of ways. It's very challenging, and it exposes a lot of things. And one of the things it exposes, I don't particularly like the way things are run here.
We are leaving because this place has become so horribly governed that if you have the means to get out, you are going to leave. We are but the tip of the spear. We are not the only one.
Another blow to the Bay Area. Companies leaving town for much cheaper taxes and a cheaper cost of living. This time it's Oracle.
Hewlett-Packard, the latest tech company to leave Silicon Valley.
Now underway in Beverly Hills.
In upscale Santa Monica, devastating destruction as looters attack business after business.
Hey guys, you see this?
Governor Gavin Newsom to deploy the National Guard. And just minutes ago, we heard that the governor has declared a state of emergency for Los Angeles.
Why haven't you brought young people into the leadership?
With proper leadership, I believe we can solve most, if not all, of the problems that we have in our state. See, I personally believe that, in general, government should stay out of our lives. We should be allowed to work freely with minimal interference, receive safety and proper infrastructure, and in return, we pay our taxes. But unfortunately, as more of us put our heads up and look at what our government has done, we realize that the problems in our state are getting worse by government action, not better. And that creates resentment. It creates this feeling of, why am I still here? Over the last 10 years, we've had 2.4 million taxpayers leave our state to places like Texas, Florida, Vegas, Tennessee, Idaho. And they're leaving because folks are looking up to see what their government has done and are disgraced by it. It's not fair. Now, our governor argues, the population decline isn't that bad. But see, unfortunately, the governor misleads us. A lot of folks are being born in California, and a lot of folks are coming to California for schooling. But unfortunately, both of these are draws on our economy. Children and students generally take from the economy before they give back to the economy. The people who are leaving are small, medium, and large businesses and taxpayers. And so it's no surprise that homelessness is getting worse, that crime is getting worse, that housing affordability is getting worse. The median home price in California is $800,000. Regulations and taxes aren't getting better, they're getting worse. And the last 24 years have been particularly rough. Governor Gavin Newsom also happens to have been in politics and a leader in California's politics for the last 24 years. And this is why, folks, it's time for a new leader. It's time we stop the bullshit. It's time for change. Vote for Kevin Paffrath for governor.
More than 500 California wildfires.
New encampments have been popping up throughout LA in the last 5 months. The number of people living outside appears to have multiplied.
There are now thousands of crimes a year like this one, in which the suspects are homeless.
1 in 6 restaurants will not survive the pandemic.
People are just bailing. There's a mass exodus out of California right now.
You can quibble about the guidelines, et cetera, but the spirit of what I'm preaching all the time was contradicted.
This is heartbreaking to see. This is not the kind of California I want to leave my children and future generations. This is not the representation that we should be for the country or the world as the 5th largest economy. Now, you might not know this, but my family is German. Germany is the 4th largest economy in the world. With a strong California, we shouldn't be worried about homelessness or having enough water or having enough power. We should be focused on becoming the 4th largest economy in the world and kicking Germany's butt by growing our economy, not shrinking our economy, not decaying, but by growing. And folks, I believe that my policies will bring us exactly this kind of growth. Now, there are a few things that you should know about me. First, no more lockdowns. I do not agree with lockdowns. I also believe in vaccines for COVID and masks as a choice, as a personal choice. Now, I do believe in regulations that might require science-based HEPA filtration and ventilation requirements for businesses to remain open, but I don't believe in lockdowns and mandates. Now, I need you to also know, as we get into my policies, that I'm not a far leftist and I'm not a far rightist. In fact, most people who learn about me don't even know if I'm a Democrat or a Republican. That's because my policies and my solutions are California solutions. They're neutral, middle-of-the-road solutions, and I seek to provide those solutions with both Democrats and Republicans. But let's be real. A Republican governor is going to get sandbagged for the next year after this recall election. A Republican governor is not going to get anything done between a transition of power at the end of 2021 and the next election in 2022. I am running as a Democrat. I have been a registered Democrat since 18. And I believe with a supermajority of Democrats in Congress, and a leader that understands how important and interconnected our problems are and will treat our problems as a state of emergency, I believe and I know that we can fix California and we can make substantial progress within this next year. Now, before we get into the specifics, I want you to consider voting for Kevin Paffrath on this next California ballot in the recall election. Consider this. If you're a Republican and you want to see things get done, vote yes on recall and vote yes on Kevin Paffrath. If you're a Democrat and you do not support the recall, then vote Kevin Paffrath as your backup option. If you are a Democrat and you are voting for the recall, then also vote yes on Kevin Paffrath for governor.
Much like the economic inequality of our Roman ancestors, California now suffers the highest cost-adjusted poverty rate in the country. It also has one of the nation's highest ratios, which measures the inequality of wealth distribution from the richest to poorest residents. And the disparity is growing.
The buckets that we use are urinate, bowel movement. There's nowhere around here to use the bathroom. And that's hard on a person.
California's level of inequality is greater than that of neighboring Mexico and closer to Central American countries like Guatemala and Honduras. It is true that California's GDP per capita is far higher than these Central American countries, but the state has slowly morphed into a low-wage economy. Over the past decade, 80% of the state's jobs have paid under the median wage. Even at some of the state's most prestigious companies like Google, many lower and even mid-level employees live in mobile home parks. Others sleep in their cars. As a result, California's population is, for the first time in its modern history, falling. Millennials, specifically when they start having families, are heading to other states, a process that has been accelerated by the pandemic. Californian officials tried to cover up these shortcomings by pointing to the huge capital gains tax receipts they receive from large tech companies and those derived from initial public offerings. Together, these have created an enormous tax windfall that allows the state to enjoy an annual surplus even in hard times.
In my opinion, a true leader should never mislead you. Our governor said that we had a $78 billion surplus, yet didn't tell you that almost half of that came from the federal government allocated to our schools. But then he spent this surplus partially to buy votes, and now we are actually going $12 billion more into debt. Folks, should we have a surplus and then be going into debt? I'm tired of being misled. It's like when the governor tweets that because we are roaring back, we can forgive $5.2 billion of rent via a $5.2 billion rent relief program. Yet the governor doesn't tell you that $2.6 billion, or 50% of that, came from Donald Trump and the $600 stimulus check package in December. Another $2.2 billion came from Joe Biden in the $1,400 stimulus check package. That means $4.8 billion, or over 92% of the rent relief money that we are giving away in California actually came from the federal government, not from California. That means we are not roaring back because of Gavin Newsom. We are roaring back in spite of Gavin Newsom. But this rent relief money, as of May, and this money the governor has had since December and February, as of May and June, only 2.3% of the rent relief money has actually been distributed to Californians in need during an emergency. As of July, only about 6% of the money has been distributed. This is a disgrace. During an emergency, you would think that during an emergency, money could be distributed quickly, but our governor again squanders his duties.
It could happen to anybody. It could happen to anybody. And it's just hard.
Tens of thousands of people living on the streets.
They've taken over everything, and we're concerned about the safety of our employees.
The number of homeless tents and encampments
along the world-famous Venice boardwalk and nearby streets has been skyrocketing.
Every day there's fires, guns, knives, crime. There's a lot of crime here.
It's gotten to the point where my girlfriend does not feel safe to walk down to the grocery store at night because there are people shouting and throwing things on the sidewalk as they make their way down the street. Here's a Google Street View image from September of 2014. And here is the exact same spot now, just a few years later.
In 2019, there were nearly 60,000 homeless people living in LA County. In 2011, there were less than 40,000. So we've increased by 50% in less than 10 years. These are people, many of whom are mentally ill or drug addicted. But thanks to local regulations and legal consent decrees, the police have been told they are literally not allowed to move them to dry out facilities or do anything with the trash that now strews every sidewalk and underpass and overpass and embankment in LA, every single one.
And is now not asked to move, right? They use the street as their restroom.
Exactly. And they've handcuffed the LAPD and told them, you're not going to enforce anything because we don't want to offend anybody. Counterproductive and irresponsible decisions from the Board of Supervisors, the Mayor of LA, and the LA County or the LA City Council. Each and every person played a part.
You shouldn't have to worry about where are we going to stay tonight, you know?
The White House reports nearly half of the country's unsheltered homeless people live on the streets of California. And a growing number of middle and low-income people are moving out of state, with the majority of those leaving reporting an annual income under $100,000.
Whether they are people at the car wash, baggers at the supermarket, attendees at the rest homes. And what are we doing to assure ourselves that we'll be able to keep that critical part of our employment infrastructure, those folks at the bottom, because we're toast without it.
Folks, I can solve homelessness. Now, I know that is a bold claim, but I also understand that homelessness is caused by economic reasons, mental health reasons, substance abuse reasons. It's caused by crime and over-policing, the lack of opportunity for folks who get out of high school or college, the lack of opportunity for those who get out of our prison systems. I understand the causes. I understand the solutions because I've worked with homeless communities. I've been on the ground with homeless communities. I've been on the law enforcement side and I've worked with the professionals. Folks, we can solve it. We need emergency action day one from the governor's action that is going to coordinate a homeless response professionally conducted with the help of nonprofits and businesses to end our homeless crisis. We are going to create 80 emergency facilities throughout the state, and there are plenty of vacant commercial office buildings or commercial buildings, thanks to Governor Newsom's lockdown policies, that we can utilize to centralize support for food, mental health, education, substance abuse. But let me make this very, very crystal clear. After 60 days of my administration, no one will be living on our streets of California. And that's because people aren't living on the streets, they're dying on our streets. More people are dying on our streets from homelessness than gun violence. That is a lot of people dying, especially when you have a governor who is obsessed with more gun control measures, which at the same time, those gun control measures just lead to more gun sales. And ultimately, the people conducting crime in our state aren't using California rostered handguns or California compliant weapons anyway. It's ironic, or not. But the reality is, we need to centralize support. Now, while there's a lot of work to do to make sure our plan is perfect, anything is better than spending $5,000 per month on a single tent for a single homeless person like San Francisco is doing, while at the same time they're spending $20,000 on a trash can.
San Francisco's Board of Supervisors is looking to replace its green trash canisters, and the ones under consideration cost as much as $20,000 each.
Or it's even better than what Los Angeles is doing, which is just, let's hand homeless cell phones. Now, it's important to know that the facilities we're going to build are going to be completely optional. Think Javits Center style, partitioned bedrooms with centralized canteens and support for folks.
There was nothing on this whole floor, but Monday morning it went from nothing to what you see out there, at least on this part. By Friday, there was 1,000 beds downstairs, and now we're building another 2,000. So in 2 weeks, we're gonna build a 3,000 bed facility.
But there's one thing Californians will no longer be allowed to do, and that is sleep on our streets. And we're going to have a transition period. We are going to utilize whatever powers we can to transition our homeless communities, to make sure the homeless communities that we have can finally trust their government again. In fact, we're going to work with the mayors and presidents of homeless communities to make sure we solve homelessness correctly once and for all.
Customs and Border Protection say they've recently seen the highest number of apprehensions along the southwestern border in 2 decades, with nearly 180,000 in April alone, a 34% increase from the last surge in the spring of 2019.
When you see these rural drop-offs occur, what does that say about the system?
Well, it would say that the system is bogged down.
See, folks ask me, why is illegal immigration so bad into our country? Well, it's because our legal immigration system is a failure. It is horrible and it is broken. Under my leadership, California will be the first state to finally work with the federal government and figure out how to appropriately streamline immigration, limited quantities, proper quantities into the United States with individuals who can sustain themselves without relying on social services. We need a governor who can fix the problems we have in the state.
The state of California is currently facing the worst drought in 1,200 years. Last month, the water level in Lake Oroville, the state's second largest reservoir, was so low that hundreds of houseboats were hauled out because there wasn't enough water to hold them.
For the first time ever, the state has stopped providing water to farmers in some areas.
Our water allocation in this area is 0. Apparently, these trees haven't received any water at all this year.
California's agricultural output could fall by $3.5 billion this year. Costs across the nation are already up, attributed at least partly to the drought, with more increases expected down the line as crop yields come in this fall. The price for a single avocado could jump by 28%. The lack of water also means fire.
The dried out vegetation became fuel to feed, at that time, the largest fire on record, the Thomas Fire in Southern California, which forced over 100,000 people to evacuate their homes.
The state's grid might experience widespread power outages and suffer from damaged power lines. In essence, this situation highlights this is gonna be a long, hot summer of higher electricity bills, periodic rationing, and blackouts for millions of households and businesses.
This year, the largest reservoir in the U.S. has fallen to a record low depth. From space, satellite photos tell the story of how the drought has robbed the lake of its glory. From its 750 miles of shoreline, a deep ring of bleached rock shows just how far the water has dropped in the last 20 years and is liable to keep on falling.
This is an example of flood irrigation, one of the oldest and most common irrigation methods which distributes water over the soil by allowing it to flow downhill with gravity. Now, there's a beautiful simplicity to it, but it's actually the least efficient way to irrigate, as much of the water either evaporates away or seeps into the soil out of reach of the plant's roots. And on top of that, alfalfa is a very thirsty crop, which means the beef that comes from the cattle it feeds is the highest water use food commonly available. Drip and sprinkler irrigation can be much more efficient, but Nancy told us she's not been able to get the permits needed to change the irrigation style on the farm.
Here's a satellite picture of the state from January 2013. And this is from January of this year.
Shouldn't the 5th largest economy in the world have enough water? Folks, we can solve this. If we spent our money wisely, rather than on things like forgiving traffic tickets or on kickbacks so that the governor can try to buy votes and loyalty, we could be solving our water crisis. Just as an example, and this is just one example, when I become governor, we are going to use the best strategy for solving our water crisis, and it could be a combination of things, from more reservoirs to desalinization, or the idea that we've liked a lot recently, which has been building an aqueduct from Los Angeles to the Mississippi River, paying for cheap, clean water, sharing the cost of construction with other water-starved states like New Mexico and Arizona along the way, and doubling the flow of water to our Colorado River so we can finally end our water shortage. Folks, there are common sense solutions. We just need a leader who stops wasting money and instead prioritizes spending appropriately. This is how we can create new jobs and solve problems instead of focusing on buying votes Remember, if you like what you're hearing so far, the next $1 million donated to the campaign at stopthebullship.com will be matched personally by me. I will match $1 donations with another $1 of expenses towards the campaign. That means if you donate $100, we get $200 of buying power for the campaign. See, the problem we have in our country is politicians have this obsession with being career politicians. I'm not looking to be a career politician. I'm not getting into politics for money. In fact, I will not accept the governor's salary at all. That will go directly back to the state of California. The taxpayers don't have to pay me. I want to give back to California, and I want to serve. But we need common sense. And we start common sense on day one by electing Kevin Paffrath.
A new report out today on California's deadliest wildfire ever. The inferno north of Sacramento killed 85 people, destroyed 18,000 homes and buildings.
The Sonoma County DA has filed criminal charges against PG&E over its role in starting the 2019 Kincaid fire.
A huge lurking culprit, power lines.
Power lines played a major role in the fires in Northern California in 2017. Power lines can come down in strong winds, or trees can blow into power lines.
That's an understatement. Cal Fire investigators say electrical lines and equipment sparked 16 of the big blazes that killed 44 people and burned 250,000 acres in Northern California in October 2017. And Cal Fire linked 15 of those 16 specifically to power company PG&E.
Now, when I first heard these stories, I thought, oh my goodness, our utility companies, the monopolies the government enables, are creating fires. They should be held accountable, and as they should be. But we also need to realize that when you point one finger, three fingers point back, and when the government points the finger at the utilities, the government is also a cause of the problem. See, the government refuses to allow the renewal of transmission lines, infrastructure systems, natural gas power plants to increase efficiency at them unless anything that is done is 100% green. Now look, I am all for green energy, but I also realize that green energy is a transition. Green energy will take time. We can incentivize green energy, but when we mandate green energy 100% of the time for new infrastructure projects, before we're ready, what happens? We're left with power lines that are 20 years older than their useful life expectancy. Power lines that snap and cause fires. We're left with 1980s and 1990s natural gas facilities that can't function properly during peak hours, and so we have blackouts. That doesn't mean we need to build new natural gas power plants, but it does mean that if regulations were loosened slightly and standards were elevated, we could actually increase the efficiency of our natural gas production 8 times today if we simply authorized the increase of this efficiency. But because it's not 100% green, the government says no. So, in other words, the government handcuffs our existing infrastructure system, which is leading to more fires, more damage, and more blackouts. This is not the way to live in California. And again, that's why we've got to vote yes on Kevin Paffrath for governor, so we can bring common sense solutions to the problems we have in the state. And at the same time, wouldn't it make sense to properly fund Cal Fire so that we can actually conduct the proper controlled burns to prevent forest fires in partnership with the federal government, which owns a lot of land in California? And guess what? Controlled burns, not only are they better for the environment, they protect our endangered species, but they only cost $32 an acre, whereas fighting a wildfire costs up to $1,500 an acre. We need common sense. We have to end the bullshit.
When Governor Newsom recently defended his economic track record, he predictably pointed to the new round of IPOs to assure us that the state's growing billionaire class is doing, quote, pretty damn well. Yet, Newsom currently faces a recall campaign. For in spite of his optimism, the governor's inconsistent rhetoric has angered large numbers of the state's population.
And new details are emerging that appear to indicate California Governor Gavin Newsom's new $3.7 million mansion was gifted to him under highly questionable circumstances.
Attorneys and legal experts say being gifted such a property through an LLC is a huge warning sign for tax and regulatory agencies and likely indicates either tax fraud, money laundering, or a payoff or bribe.
HP is moving its enterprise division headquarters to Houston, and many others are following. Oracle, founded in the 70s alongside Apple and Atari, announced in December that it's relocated its headquarters to Austin. Palantir is relocating to Denver. Elon Musk moved from Los Angeles to Austin, where Tesla's building its next gigafactory.
What really is surprising is the really major big companies that have put down roots here are the ones that are leaving. The mom and pops are going as well, but when they leave, they take 20 workers or 30 workers with them. They're not taking thousands of workers with them, and they're not taking Elon Musk.
Other major companies that have moved their headquarters out of California in recent years include Toyota, Charles Schwab, Nestle, and Jamba Juice. A 2018 study found that 1,800 companies left in 2016 alone, relocating mostly to Texas.
We have high taxes, high housing costs. Cost of living in California is about 50% higher than the median state. Public services are not being delivered. So we've never really had all of that combination occurring as we've had in the past. And we've never had alternative places to move to. So for example, now in Texas, in Austin, Texas, there's a big tech hub there.
The flight of businesses out of our state is exactly why I propose a future schools solution. Future schools are a combination of high school, colleges, vocational schools, and schools that provide a financial education. So that way folks at 16 have a choice to go to a future school if they want to. But future schools will also be available for adults. And these future schools are going to be very special because we are going to use future schools as a way to work with large, medium, and small businesses. So that way businesses are telling us what we should teach in our future schools, not bureaucrats coming up with miscellaneous curricula. Then, when businesses tell us what they want us to teach our students, small, medium, and large size businesses, all size businesses throughout California, then when we provide those workers, we're going to require that these businesses stay in California and stop leaving California. If you want us to provide you high quality, strong, hard-working Californian workers, then you better stay. And that is what I stand for. But I also stand for letting homeless folks and criminals in jails access separated, but still the same concept, separated facilities, separate future schools. So that way folks who are homeless have an opportunity to get educated, get a career, and get financially well off. That way folks who are criminals have an opportunity to get out of jail and actually get placed in a job because they went to a future school and they can get a career. Folks, the starting salary for a programmer is $74,000 to $120,000. The starting salary for a nurse in this state is over $50,000. None of these people are on Medi-Cal or requiring government aid. If we properly invest in our Californians, people don't have to resort to being homeless, they don't have to resort to crime, and we can grow our economy and keep our businesses here. It's just common sense. We just need to stop the bullshit.
I remember I interviewed Gavin Newsom personally back when I was on LA radio on local, and he said that the high-speed bullet train was a bad idea.
If you had your druthers, would you kill the thing?
I would take the dollars and redirect it to other more pressing infrastructure needs.
Then, of course, he got into power, and it was, this high-speed bullet train. What a wonderful idea.
The high-speed rail. So I never seek to ruffle feathers, but I will always be transparent with you. If you ask me where I stand on something, I would rather tell you either I don't know and I will get back to you, or I'd rather tell you exactly how I feel, even if that's not what you want to hear, because I will never stab you in the back. I want you to have a transparent governor. This is why I believe having somebody with a lot of experience educating on YouTube and on social media is exactly what our government needs. A transparent governor, a governor who can show you what's going on behind the scenes so you can have a say in what goes on behind closed doors, because we need to open the doors. We need to let the light in. We need transparency again. Let's talk about where I stand on the high-speed rail. The high-speed rail is suggested to be good for our economy and for our environment. But let's be real. The high-speed rail is estimated to break even, not in 5 years, not in 10 years, not in 15 years, but the environmental costs to build it and the money it takes to build it will likely take over 71 years to break even. Folks, would you invest in a stock like Tesla or AMC if somebody told you it was going to take 71 years to break even on your investment? Of course not, if that's what our government is doing. The reality is, with $100 billion, we could waive taxes on all Californians making less than $250,000 for 3 years. Folks, the high-speed rail is estimated to cost over $100 billion. Would you rather have a high-speed choo-choo train for $100 billion or no income taxes under $250,000 for the first 3 years? Come on, folks. It's common sense. Even if we were to spend the money on infrastructure to reduce our traffic problems, why don't we spend the money dealing with our traffic issues where we actually have traffic? The high-speed rail is estimated to cost $125 million per mile. Underground tunnels, which our mass transit bus systems and our commuter cars could use, cost about $10 million per mile. Folks, that means instead of spending money on a high-speed rail where we don't really have a traffic issue, we could be investing in tunnels where we spend a fraction of the money on actually solving a traffic issue that we really have. Think about it, if we invested and built an optional variable direction toll road underneath our busy highways, like the 5, the 405, or the 5, we could actually solve traffic by providing folks an optional path if they're willing to pay for it. Now it's optional, that's because we still have the freeway, which will be completely free. But if they want to go faster and skip traffic, they could use a tunnel system. Our buses would be allowed to use these tunnel systems as well, increasing the efficacy of our mass transit. They're safer in earthquakes than above ground transportation. And think about it kind of like being underwater in an ocean with waves. And they're much cheaper. And we can build them where we need them. Folks, these are the kinds of common sense solutions that we need. Now, I'm not saying that 100% tunnels are the solution to everything, but they are a solution that is better than what we're doing now. And that's the kind of governor we need. Somebody who's going to lead with realistic solutions and actually be a leader. That's why we have to vote for Kevin Paffrath and stop the bullshit.
How did the Bay Area's housing crunch get this bad?
The number of people in California who can afford to buy a home continues to fall.
The Southern California real estate market is hotter than ever.
The state is dealing with a major growing housing crisis. This has been a political football really in the state for many years. Many people are unable to afford sky-high rents or pay their mortgages, and thousands are living on the streets.
He says state, county, and local leaders need to take bold steps.
Local governments could zone more area for multifamily housing. They could make the permitting process for multifamily housing easier
before the housing crisis gets worse.
So California has implemented a lot of regulations at the state level and also at the local level that makes it very difficult and very expensive to build new housing. And the fundamental reason is we just simply don't build enough, and what we do build is very, very expensive.
Why we have such a high housing prices here?
The first mistake is to allow virtually anyone to file a lawsuit against any development if it has or allegedly has adverse environmental consequences.
Do the parties that file them, do they make money from these lawsuits?
They absolutely make money. There are some legitimate environmental lawsuits, but they serve to further the interests of these environmental organizations.
Have we reached a point where a city like San Francisco is not livable anymore?
We have reached that point.
And what can people do to change this?
I think the message is don't let them kick the can anymore. Force them to face up to what the realities are. California is incredibly expensive. It's become unaffordable. Nearly 40% of Californians are living at or near poverty. And as a humane society, this is something we just shouldn't tolerate.
Real estate hits near and dear to me because real estate is how I began building my wealth, first as a real estate agent, then broker, then real estate investor. And I've never evicted a tenant, and I work with everybody to try to make sure everybody can build wealth that works with me. But the reality is, we have a lack of homes in this state. That's why the median home price is $800,000. That's unacceptable. It's unlivable. What we need are not 482 building regulations That is 482 different building and safety departments. We need to streamline our building and safety process so we can speed up construction and let the free market help us solve our housing crisis. Now, I'm not saying completely remove government from housing, but we need to streamline the process, speed it up, and make it reasonable again, so that way we can redevelop our abandoned strip malls or facilities that we could turn into townhomes or condos, so that we can build new communities next to solar and wind farms, so rather than burning off excess solar or wind energy, we can actually supply that energy to new communities and help change our climate future by positively affecting climate change with net negative communities. That is, having communities built near solar and wind farms. So we have thousands of new homes, and we have communities that create more energy than they use. We can do these things by streamlining regulation, while at the same time still respecting local ordinances to make sure we maintain the beauty of each individual city. We can do this, but we need a strong leader who realizes that current law doesn't work. Governor Newsom just cheered the signing of SB 7. This was a housing efficiency bill. Well, when I read the bill, I was shocked to find out that the housing efficiency bill would only streamline the environmental review process if you're building a property worth at least $15 million. So in other words, anyone building less expensive homes is not getting streamlined housing regulation via SB 7, which Governor Newsom just cheered as something that would streamline housing regulation. But when I read the bill further, I realized that these developers with $15 million plus projects can apply for streamlined permits through the governor's office. In other words, we have a governor who's consolidating power in his office while making the problems for us normal Californians worse. This is unacceptable. It's time for a change. It's time to stop the bullshit. And it's time to vote for Kevin Paffrath for governor.
Let's get right to live pictures of looting that is still going on. Chopper 5 is over the Walmart store in San Leandro, where people have been running in and out of a side door with whatever they can carry out. And now we are seeing some smoke coming out of the store, but police are just now moving in, and we will certainly keep an eye on this.
Because of what they described as roving bands of looters and rioters.
But tonight they accused police of racial profiling.
There exists racism in our criminal justice system. Here's just a quick example. Traffic stops are studied and researched to disproportionately affect Blacks and Hispanics, leading to over-policing of those already disproportionately affected by poverty. And we already know that if you are in poverty, you have a twice likelihood of being a victim of violent crime, folks. When we start connecting the dots, we realize that crime, economics, poverty, and racism and policing are all interconnected. And so this is why we have to solve all of the issues, from why we have poverty, education, homelessness, why we have issues in these areas, but also realizing that you might know that racial profiling is illegal. But did you know that vehicular profiling is legal? That is, officers can profile vehicles that potentially look Black or look Hispanic. Folks, Governor Gavin Newsom bankrupted 1/3 of California's restaurants, disproportionately affecting Blacks and Hispanics. Blacks and Hispanics and all Californians should vote for somebody who understands that the issues in our society, specifically surrounding crime and punishment, revolve around many complicated issues. And a leader that can connect the dots between all of these and solve them is somebody that you should vote for. Here's an example of how to solve the issues. First, we need future schools that teach financial education and give folks an opportunity, even adults an opportunity, to get educated. Even if that means paying students who are over 18 to go to future schools $2,000 per month, we would only be spending $48,000 in a 2-year period investing in Californians to make sure they don't go back to crime, to make sure they don't end up homeless, to make sure they're not desperate and in despair and in poverty, but instead have a financial education and a career via future schools. And then guess what? We don't end up spending $120,000 a year babysitting someone in jail, because that's what we do right now. Doesn't it make sense to invest in Californians rather than waste money overspending in our jails? We need community policing. We need more transparent policing. We need faster release of body camera footage, and body cameras that are actually on all of the time, not turned on when desired to be turned on. But we also need funding for better training, and the funding that does exist needs to be better monitored and more transparent. And so it's together with community policing, transparency, budget oversight, and education that we can slowly start undoing the disaster of criminal justice in our state. Because right now, we have a governor who just turns a blind eye to crime. Get this, in the Mojave Desert, illegal cannabis farms are tapping our fire hydrants for precious water to farm their illegal crops. 80% of cannabis sales in California are illegal 5 years after California voters voted to make cannabis sales legal. It's literally been a full 5-year plan, and we still have 80% of our cannabis sales illegal. Why? Well, it's because of overbearing regulations and overbearing permits and overbearing taxation that makes it much easier to conduct an illegal grow, pay a $500 fine in the event that you were caught, and just continue to grow illegally. This is leading to our fire hydrants being tapped and illegally robbed of our precious water. Yet what is the government doing? California decided, rather than either streamline regulations and simplify the legalization process, or to actually enforce crime, California just decided, you know what? Let's just remove the fire hydrants. Because why actually solve the underlying issue? Folks, it's time to stop the bullshit. We have to vote for Kevin Paffrath for governor and bring common sense back. Stop the bullshit. Now, if you've liked what you've heard here, please go to stopthebullshit.com, donate, support the campaign, and also keep an eye on stopthebullshit.com for locations where we will be distributing yard signs, flyers, stickers, bumper stickers, business cards, you name it. We need to get the message out. We need to do so together. We don't have $30 million to fight Gavin Newsom, but we've got a really good set of seed funding, and as a result, I'm matching every single donation that comes into this campaign up to an additional $1 million, dollar for dollar. So if you donate $100, I will be able to put $200 into this campaign. Let's make this a movement. Stop the bullshit. Get Gavin Newsom out, and let's fix California and make California competitive. Make California the model state that it should be. Vote yes on recall, and yes for Kevin Paffrath for governor.